Everyone thinks they already know what strength looks like. Loud voices, visible victories, unshakable confidence that never cracks. But here's the paradox. Real strength doesn't always announce itself in obvious ways. Sometimes it develops in forms that, on the surface, appear unusual, awkward, or even fragile. And that's exactly why most people miss it. While the majority are busy chasing flashy symbols of power, Sigma males are quietly building something far more enduring. An emotional strength that operates beneath the surface, invisible to most. And once you notice how they do it, you understand why life storms rarely shake them. Quick question before we dive in. Where are you watching this from right now? And what time is it on your clock? It's always fascinating to see how these ideas reach people at the exact moment they're meant to, almost like a reminder from life itself. Stick with me till the end, because what you'll discover here may just change how you view strength forever. Here are 7 uncommon ways Sigma males develop emotional resilience. Patterns subtle enough to slip under the radar, yet powerful enough to explain why they remain steady when others collapse. Number 1. Sitting with pain instead of running from it. Most people treat pain like it's poison, something to flush out or escape as fast as possible. The second discomfort creeps in, they scramble to drown it under distractions. Some bury themselves in endless work. Others drown it in noise, scrolling, talking, or chasing anything that keeps them from being alone with what actually hurts. And at first, that seems normal. After all, who wants to sit face to face with heartbreak, disappointment, or the crushing weight of failure? But here's where Sigma males stand apart. While most people run, some don't. They sit in the fire. They let it burn. And more often than not, Sigma males belong to this group. Not because they want to, but because life gave them no other option. From early on, they've had to handle more than their share of struggles. Alone. No hand-holding, no safety nets. When pain arrived, there was no one to absorb the blow, no one to clean up the mess. The only option was to face it directly. And over time, repeated exposure to hardship transforms you. It teaches a lesson most people never grasp. Pain doesn't last forever. It rises, it breaks you open, it shakes your foundations, but eventually, it passes. What remains afterward, though, is different. Each time you survive, you come out a little tougher, a little sharper, a little less afraid of the next storm. That's why Sigma males don't shatter as easily when life gets rough. They've already carried loads heavier than they should have, endured storms that forced them to adapt in silence. And when you've been forged in that kind of quiet fire, the chaos of the world doesn't destroy you anymore, it shapes you. Number 2. Treating silence as a weapon, not a weakness. There's something peculiar about silence. Most people experience it as an emergency. A pause in conversation feels like failure. A quiet room feels uncomfortable, as if something is wrong. That compulsion to fill the gap isn't random. It comes from the way the human mind is wired. Psychologists even have a term for it: social noise anxiety. It's the instinctive urge to avoid being judged in stillness, which is why so many instantly grab a phone, crack a joke, or spill words just to escape the weight of silence. But Sigma males don't flinch in the same way. For them, silence isn't an absence to escape from. It's the natural backdrop of life. Growing up more inward-facing, they didn't always have the luxury of constant chatter or endless reassurance. Over time, that shaped their ability to see quiet not as something threatening, but as something useful, even powerful. Eventually, they began to notice what silence reveals in others. How people, uncomfortable with the stillness, start oversharing, explaining themselves unnecessarily, or exposing nerves they meant to hide. From a psychological perspective, this comes down to 2 traits: high introspection and low dependence on external approval. Sigma males don't tie their self-worth to constant interaction. And because of that, they can sit in silence without their identity cracking. Ironically, that very calm unsettles others. The silence grows louder than any words could. But what makes it powerful isn't mystery or manipulation, it's restraint. By holding the silence, Sigma males allow others to reveal themselves while keeping their own position guarded. That's why when chaos erupts and everything around them grows loud and messy, their quiet presence often speaks the loudest. Number 3. Turning failure into training. Failure is one of the most universal fears. For most people, it isn't just about losing, it's about what follows. The shame, the judgment, the gnawing thought that maybe they're not good enough after all. And that fear explains why so many people avoid risks entirely. They'd rather play safe than face the wreckage of falling short. But Sigma males process failure differently. Not because they're naturally fearless, but because life cornered them into it. When you grow up without anyone rushing in to catch you, you learn early that failure isn't optional. It's inevitable. You mess up, you lose, you fall short, and no one swoops in to fix it. That repeated exposure rewires something in the mind. Instead of equating failure with shame, Sigma males begin associating it with adaptation, with growth, with a test of resilience. Psychological studies show that the Sigma personality type often leans high on traits like introversion, independence, and analytical thinking. These qualities allow them to dissect mistakes, extract lessons, and adjust course, instead of drowning in self-pity or external judgment. For them, failure becomes less of a dead end and more of a training ground, one that sharpens rather than breaks. This combination pulls Sigma men inward rather than outward whenever things fall apart. Where most people instantly tie failure to the fear of external judgment, what will everyone think of me? Sigmas don't operate on that same axis. Because they're less socially driven, their sense of self-worth isn't glued to outside approval. And that small difference spares them from the shame spiral that traps so many others. Of course, the sting is still there. Failure always hurts. But instead of drowning in it, they've trained themselves to translate pain into data. Each loss becomes information. And once failure stops being a threat and turns into a teacher, it loses its power to freeze you in place. That's why Sigma men rarely unravel after setbacks. They've been conditioned time and time again to see every collapse as part of the larger process. To them, failure isn't evidence that they're weak. It's proof they're still in motion, still learning, still refining. And that shift in perspective builds a form of resilience most people never touch, simply because they never allow themselves enough room to fail and grow. Number 4. Letting go of the need to be understood. One of life's hardest truths is this. No matter what you do, people will misunderstand you. They'll judge you on fragments of your story, quick impressions, or assumptions that have little to do with who you really are. And for most people, that judgment cuts deep. They'll spend years explaining, defending, and justifying, desperate to convince the world that they're not who others assume them to be. But the tragedy is, no matter how much they talk, the judgment never truly disappears. This is where Sigma males diverge. Not because they don't care at all, but because they've lived in that misunderstood space long enough to realize something most people never figure out. You don't win the battle for understanding. The more energy you spend trying to prove yourself, the more power you bleed out. Eventually, it clicks. Peace doesn't come from being understood. Peace comes from carrying on anyway. Instead of clinging to reassurance, Sigmas lean on something psychologists call internal framing. They run the world through their own logic before letting it touch their emotions. That's why misunderstanding doesn't land as a personal attack. It's just static, background noise that never makes it through their filter. As the old saying goes, not everyone was meant to understand your story, and that's okay because it wasn't written for them. For Sigma males, that realization transforms misunderstanding from a wound into something they can simply walk past. And here's the paradox. Once you stop trying to prove yourself, you become harder to control. Misunderstanding loses its grip. It no longer chains you down. For Sigmas, letting go of the need to be understood isn't about arrogance or rebellion. It's survival. And with time, that survival becomes strength, the kind of strength no outside opinion can touch. Number 5. Building a life larger than yourself. one of the fastest ways to feel fragile is to make everything about you. When your whole identity is tied to personal wins, then every failure feels devastating. Every rejection cuts to the bone. Every mistake becomes evidence that you're not enough. That self-centered frame of living magnifies every blow until even the smallest setbacks feel unbearable. Sigma males tend to escape this trap by orienting their lives towards something greater than their own ego. For some, it's a cause. For others, a craft. For some, it's people they quietly protect, provide for, or dedicate themselves to. Whatever it is, that larger mission gives context to their struggles. Hard days aren't just about me suffering. They're about holding steady so the bigger vision doesn't collapse. Psychologist Viktor Frankl captured this truth in Man's Search for Meaning, written from the most brutal conditions imaginable. Nazi concentration camps. He noticed a striking pattern. Prisoners who focused only on their suffering often collapsed under the despair. But those who held onto a vision, reuniting with loved ones, finishing unfinished work, or believing their pain still served some higher purpose, endured longer, even when their bodies were failing. Meaning didn't erase the suffering, but it gave them a reason to carry it. And that's the same principle Sigma men embody in their own quiet way. Their strength doesn't come from ignoring pain. It comes from tethering it to a purpose that makes it worth carrying. For Sigma males, this isn't about trying to look noble or pretending to be self-righteous. It's far more practical than that. Purpose is what spreads the weight evenly across their shoulders. When you're tethered to something bigger than yourself, you don't just carry your own struggles. You carry them for the sake of what truly matters most. And that simple shift makes even the heaviest burdens feel survivable. That's why their strength doesn't appear brittle, forced, or performative. It comes from knowing their life isn't just a scoreboard of personal wins or losses. When life throws its hardest punches, that deeper anchor, the bigger mission, keeps them upright when others crumble. Number 6. Becoming comfortable with uncertainty. Most people crave control. They want guarantees, tidy answers, and carefully laid out plans that promise safety. The unknown unsettles them. It feels like the ground being ripped away, and because of that, many cling tightly to routines, to titles, to people, to anything that gives the illusion of stability. But Sigma males function differently. For them, uncertainty isn't just endured. It's woven into how they live. They don't spend their lives chasing false security. Instead, they walk with the unknown as if it's a permanent companion, and this gives them a rare edge. While others freeze in the face of change, Sigmas keep moving forward. Here's the psychology behind it. They tend to operate with high levels of cognitive flexibility. In simple terms, their minds can pivot faster when old plans collapse. Where rigid thinkers get stuck repeating, "This shouldn't be happening," flexible thinkers ask instead, "What now?" Over time, this habit reshapes how they process chaos. The unknown stops being an enemy and starts looking more like a field of possibilities. Of course, uncertainty still stings. It brings stress just like it does for everyone else. But the difference is Sigma males allow that stress to sharpen their awareness rather than paralyze their mind. Psychologists call this stress inoculation. Repeated exposure to unpredictability builds resilience. That's why when the ground shakes and others break down, Sigma men look strangely steady. They aren't calm because life is smooth. They're calm because they've trained themselves to operate without a script. Number 7. Stop trying to be good at everything. Modern life pushes the illusion that you have to be a jack of all trades just to survive. At work, at home, even in friendships, people feel pressure to perform, to juggle everything, to prove they can keep up with the endless demands. On the surface, it might look impressive, but inside it drains them dry. Slowly, the weight of keeping every plate spinning starts to break them down. Sigma males separate themselves here, not because they're superhuman, but because they've felt firsthand what happens when you spread yourself too thin. While most chase approval by saying yes to everything, Sigmas take the opposite road. They'd rather be razor-sharp in a few meaningful areas than average at everything. It doesn't always look glamorous. In fact, sometimes it makes Sigma males appear less capable to outsiders. But what most people can't see is that this approach is actually building strength where it matters most. Psychologists call this trait selective focus. Instead of scattering their energy across endless obligations, Sigma men channel their attention into what truly carries weight and quietly let the rest fade away. It's not that they deny their weaknesses. It's that they refuse to let those weaknesses define their worth. Because their identity isn't built on looking flawless, they don't crumble under the pressure of trying to be everything for everyone. And here's the twist. What looks like a limitation from the outside is actually a powerful strategy. By narrowing their focus, they create depth. By choosing fewer battles, they win the ones that truly matter. And when life delivers its hardest blows, it's not the generalist who stands tall. It's the one who built unshakable ground beneath his feet. That's the quiet genius of the Sigma male. If this message speaks to you, hit that like button, share this with someone who needs it, and subscribe to Epic Persona. Here, we break down the psychology and power of men who move differently, and why that difference makes them unforgettable. Question for you: do you think strength comes from doing everything, or from mastering what matters most?